Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing. I think it's a really important hearing. Thanks for the witnesses. I know it's a very distinguished panel. You know, one of the things that comes up very frequently in this committee is the commitment that we all have to clean air, clean water. My state of Alaska has a lot of water and a lot of air and a very pristine environment. So we're certainly a state that's very committed to that. As a matter of fact, we have some of the cleanest water and cleanest air in the country, in the world. And but one of the things that I've always been concerned about is that we also need to abide by the law or the Constitution, especially federal agencies. And in my view, the EPA is creating a record on their major rules that they've been promulgating as not abiding by the law. And a number of us have been concerned about it. We raise it. I think everybody should be raising it on both sides of the aisle, not just Republicans and Democrats, because part of our oversight jurisdiction here is making sure that agencies do what is required by the law. And as all of you know, being legal professionals and experts in your field, that federal agencies cannot just undertake actions because they feel like it. They have to have a statutory or constitutional authority to act. Would everybody on the panel agree with that very basic premise of administrative law? That nod from everybody. I'm showing that everybody's nodding. Yes. I want the EPA officials to make sure they see this because it's a pretty uncontroversial statement, but it sometimes doesn't always seem to make it over to the agency. So it's not just me or others saying that. If you look at the history in the last couple years, utility air regulators versus EPA, they lost that Supreme Court case. EPA versus Michigan, they lost that Supreme Court case. The WOTUS rule right now has been stayed. And pretty incredibly, the Clean Power Rule has been stayed. My team did a little bit of research, and we asked CRS. They said, looking at review of treaties on the Supreme Court practice and Supreme Court previous decisions, this is the first time of any Supreme Court case that they have ever found where the Supreme Court of the United States placed a stay or injunction of a federal regulation before a lower court had ruled on the merits, where the lower court had not granted a stay previously. First time in the Supreme Court's history. So my question to you is, why do you think they did that? That's very, very dramatic. And I'm going to give you a little hint of why I think they may have done that. It's not just the track record, where they're losing every case, but not too long before that case was announced, Gina McCarthy was asked on a TV show if she thought she was going to win the EPA versus Michigan case. And of course, that was a Supreme Court case. Of course, it's normal for an administrator to say, of course, we're going to win. We did a good job. But then she went on, and she should have just stopped. Because then she went on to say publicly, which is a statement I still find stunning from a federal official, to say, quote, but even if we don't win, the rule was promulgated 3 years ago. Most of them are already in compliance, meaning the American people and private sector companies. Investments, hundreds of millions, have been made, so we'll catch up. We're still going to get to the toxic pollution of these facilities, unquote. So she's saying even if we don't win, we win. Even if we lose in court, we win anyways, because we promulgated this, and the poor sucker companies have had to abide by it, even if they're going to get the rule overturned. So I'd like your views. Ms. Wood, I'll start with you. Why do you think the Supreme Court took really historic action to stop the Supreme Court? And it's not, again, it's not just Republicans talking about this. Lawrence Tribe, when he was asked and was arguing against this rule, was very critical, saying it was unconstitutional. And was quoted as saying, "Burning the Constitution should not be part of our national energy policy." Do you think the EPA has been burning the Constitution?
I think that the historic, nature of this stay, and you're correct that it is historic, does definitely stem from all of the things that you have noted, which is the fact that the Michigan versus EPA case, billions had been spent to put on control equipment for a rule that was then found unlawful. I think,
And the administrator seems to view that as part of her strategy.
well,
Even if we lose later, it took 5 years to get to the Supreme Court. Everybody had to comply anyways, so who cares about the rule of law?
right, and at least I guess in that rule, if that was her strategy, it worked. And, and the Supreme Court may have been very dismayed by that, and the statements that she made were part of the stay briefing. And also, as you note, and as Professor Tribe had noted, there are a lot of legal infirmities with this rule that I'm sure, got the attention of the Supreme Court.
Any other members just want to comment on why they think the Supreme Court took this historic action?
Senator, I think EPA's record before the Supreme Court is not nearly the one that you characterized.
They're 0 for 4 in the last, or 0 for 3 in the last Supreme Court.
No, they won EME Homer City Generation versus EPA, the cross-state air pollution rule. In the
What year was that?
That was in 2014.
Okay.
The UR case, they lost one issue, they won one issue. The issue they won on affected the vast bulk of the emissions. So I think
Utility air regulators, they lost that big time.
no, in the utility air regulators case, the UR case, utility air regulator case, there were two issues in that case. They won one.
Justice Scalia said they were violating the separation of powers.
Yes, on one issue, and that issue affected
Well,
4%
that's
of the emissions, and
pretty
they
big
won
deal.
on 87% of the emissions, or some number in the high 80s. So they
The
won most
WOTUS
of that.
rule, they're losing that.
The WOTUS rule.
Professor, why do you think the Supreme Court took this historic action against the EPA? They've never done this before. It's a big, big deal. Why do you think they did it? You think it had anything to do with Gina McCarthy's outrageous statement?
I don't know why they did it, Senator. It's an important rule. But I wanted to address the issue of the track record. The WOTUS rule, the recent decision last week was a procedural decision. It did not affect the merits of the case at all. The
It
merits have not
stayed
been
the
litigated.
entire rule. Why do you think 31 states in the United States are suing the EPA?
Well, some states are hurt by the rule. Other states are supporting the rule. There are states on both sides.
31 states, that's a lot of states.
Senator, the numbers are somewhat in flux. It's 27, it's 29. There are quite a number of states on the other side as well.
Not 31.
That is true. As I said, some states would like to see this issue not addressed at all. Others would like to see it
But don't you agree it has to be
ways.
legal? Everything the EPA
Yes.
has to do has to be based in statute or the Constitution. Ms. Woods, do you think what the EPA is doing is based in statute or the Constitution?
I do, Senator. As when you said,
Oh, I asked Ms. Woods,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
No, I don't think it is, and the 5 justices on the Supreme Court appear to agree with me. And also, just to follow back, I represented the Utility Air Regulatory Group in that case, Utility Air Regulatory Group versus EPA, and I absolutely count it as a victory for my client.
Absolutely.
And in the EME Homer case, that was a split victory between EPA and the people challenging that rule. And I'd like to note that it went back down to the DC Circuit and to look at the as-applied challenges to those states, and it was thrown out in 13 states by the DC Circuit.
Thank